It was a chilly afternoon when the single dad stepped out of his small apartment building, his daughter holding his hand tightly. They had spent the morning cleaning their small home, and now he wanted to treat her to a warm meal. Life had not been easy for them. The father worked long hours at a factory, often coming home exhausted, yet he always made sure his daughter felt loved and safe. Today, he thought, they deserved a small break from their routine as they walked down the street. The father noticed a small, family-owned restaurant tucked between larger stores. The smell of freshly cooked food filled the air, and he smiled. It was not fancy, but it looked welcoming. He pushed open the door, and the little bell chimed above them. Inside, the warmth hit them immediately, a stark contrast to the cold outside. People were chatting quietly, and the scent of roasted chicken and bread made the daughter's eyes widen. She whispered, "Can we sit by the window, Dad?" And he nodded, guiding her to a small table near the glass. While they looked at the menu, the father's eyes wandered around the room. That's when he noticed a woman sitting a few tables away. She looked tired, her uniform neat but slightly wrinkled, and her 3 children sat around her, trying to keep quiet but occasionally giggling or nudging each other. The woman's eyes darted around the restaurant, and the father could see a tension in her shoulders. Something about her made him pause for a moment, though he didn't know what. She seemed familiar with keeping calm under pressure, like someone who had spent a lifetime in situations that demanded it. The father focused back on his daughter, helping her choose something to eat. She decided on a small bowl of soup and some bread, her face lighting up at the thought of eating something hot and comforting. He ordered a simple meal for himself, and then glanced over at the woman again. Her children were restless now, and she was trying to keep them calm, speaking softly but firmly. There was a quiet dignity about her, even as she struggled with the challenges of dining out with 3 young children. When the meals arrived, the father and his daughter dug in immediately, savoring the warmth and flavors. He smiled at her, happy to see her so content. Across the room, he noticed the woman smiling at one of her children, her exhaustion momentarily softened by affection. He felt a pang of empathy. Life could be hard, and he knew how much effort it took to keep a family fed, safe, and happy, especially when it was just one parent doing the work. Time passed quickly as they ate. The father encouraged his daughter to try new things, to enjoy every bite, and to appreciate the small joys. She giggled at his playful nudges, and he laughed with her, feeling a rare lightness in his chest. The woman across the room was now gathering her children, telling them to finish their food. He noticed her reaching for her wallet, and that's when he saw her pause. Her fingers hovered over the card, and there was a brief flicker of worry on her face. Something was wrong. He couldn't hear the conversation at the counter, but he could see her frown deepen. She handed the card over, and the cashier looked at it, then at her, and shook his head slightly. The woman's lips pressed into a thin line, trying to hide her concern, but her children were watching. One of the kids whispered something, and she nodded, giving a forced smile. The father could see the subtle tension, the way she held herself, trying to shield her children from the embarrassment. The father felt a surge of compassion. He knew that feeling being in a moment of need and trying to hide it from those around you. He glanced at his daughter, who was happily eating, unaware of the adult worries that surrounded her. He wondered what he could do, if anything, to make the situation better. The woman looked around, possibly hoping for a solution, or maybe just praying no one would notice. But the father noticed. He noticed the quiet dignity in her worry, the way she tried to protect her children, even when things were not going as planned out, without thinking too much. He stood up and walked toward the counter. He asked the cashier to put the woman's bill on his tab. "It's okay," he said simply. "I'll take care of it." The cashier looked surprised, but nodded. The father returned to his table, sitting down again, feeling a little awkward, but certain it was the right thing to do. His daughter looked up, tilting her head in curiosity. "Who's it for, Dad?" she asked. He smiled at her. "Just someone who needs a little help today," he replied. She nodded, accepting the answer without question, and returned to her meal dot across the room. The woman's eyes widened as she realized what had happened. She opened her mouth to protest, but the father had already returned to his seat. She looked at her children, who were too young to understand what was happening, and felt a mixture of relief and gratitude. The weight she had been carrying in that moment lifted slightly. She could finish the meal without worry, and her children could leave the restaurant with a sense of normalcy rather than embarrassment. The father focused on his daughter again, telling her little stories and making her laugh. But he kept an eye on the woman across the room. There was something in her presence, a quiet strength, that drew his attention. He admired the way she managed her children and handled the situation with grace, even though he didn't know her at all. He felt a connection in that shared understanding of parenthood, of trying to do the best you can, even when circumstances are difficult. As the meal ended, the father and his daughter gathered their things to leave. He noticed the woman was now calmly gathering her children as well. She gave him a small nod, a gesture of thanks that needed no words. He returned the nod with a smile, feeling that small act of human connection that reminded him why he believed in kindness. They both stepped outside into the cool air, the father holding his daughter's hand a little tighter, feeling the warmth of the shared human moment still lingering. Even after they walked a few blocks, the father couldn't shake the image of the woman and her children. He wondered about her life, her challenges, and what kind of parent she was beyond that brief encounter. He realized that sometimes life presents small opportunities to make a difference, and it doesn't matter if you know the person or if they are in a position of power. What matters is that you notice, you care, and you act. Today he had done that, and he felt a quiet satisfaction that would carry him through the rest of his day. As they reached their apartment, his daughter skipped ahead, excited to tell her little story about the restaurant. He smiled to himself, thinking about the small act of kindness and how it might ripple in ways he couldn't yet see. The woman, the soldier, and her children had left a mark on him, and he hoped, in some way, he had left a small mark on them too. Life was unpredictable, often unfair, but in moments like these, there was a reminder that goodness still existed, quietly, in small gestures that could change someone's day. After the father returned to his seat, he felt a small sense of relief that he had helped someone without drawing too much attention. He watched his daughter eat, her small hands moving quickly to scoop her food, her eyes lighting up with every bite. She was innocent in a way that made the world feel lighter, and he cherished these moments more than anything. It was a simple act paying for a stranger's meal, but he knew sometimes simple acts mattered the most. Across the room, the woman's face softened as she realized she no longer had to worry about the bill. Her children were now laughing quietly, their previous tension gone. She tried to keep her composure, but her eyes met the father's briefly, and she gave a subtle nod. It was not a nod of obligation or social expectation, but of deep gratitude. The father simply smiled back, an acknowledgement that no words were needed. The human connection was enough. He turned back to his daughter, engaging her in a conversation about the food, asking her which dish she liked the best. She giggled at his exaggerated curiosity, saying everything was delicious. He laughed and told her stories about when he was a child and how he never got to eat treats like this often. She listened intently, imagining his younger self, and asked him questions that made him laugh even more. The warmth of the room and the shared moment made the earlier tension fade completely. Meanwhile, the soldier quietly watched her children, ensuring they didn't overeat or get messy. She adjusted their napkins, straightened their jackets, and whispered small instructions, like a conductor guiding an orchestra. Despite the subtle chaos, she maintained a calm, steady presence, and it was clear to the father that her strength was quiet but powerful. She managed not just the present moment, but the worry and fatigue that came from juggling everything in her life. The father admired her instinctive ability to lead and care at the same time. Without any fanfare, at one point, her youngest child reached for a toy in a small backpack, and the mother quickly encouraged him to wait until they were finished eating. The father noticed the gentle firmness in her voice, a voice that commanded attention without raising its volume. Her children obeyed almost immediately, their respect for her evident in their small gestures. He realized then that true authority didn't always come from power or rank, but from consistency, patience, and love. He smiled quietly to himself, thinking of how he tried to guide his own daughter with the same mix of firmness and kindness. As the meals continued, the father found himself reflecting on his own life. He remembered nights spent working late, coming home to a quiet apartment, and worrying about whether he was doing enough. Seeing the soldier handle her children with patience and care reminded him that he was not alone in these struggles. There were others, like her, balancing responsibilities with love, even when the world made it difficult. He felt a sense of solidarity with her, even without knowing her name. The woman looked up occasionally, watching the father and his daughter, noticing the easy interaction between them. There was a quiet dignity in their relationship, a bond that came from shared struggles and simple love. She wondered about the man who had helped her so quietly, without expecting anything in return. His actions spoke louder than any words ever could. She felt a mix of surprise and admiration. Here was a stranger, someone who didn't know her, yet he had stepped in to make a difference in her day. She thought about how rare it was to meet someone so selfless. Meanwhile, the father noticed her gaze and felt a brief moment of awkwardness. He didn't want to make her uncomfortable, but was aware that his action had drawn her attention. He returned her look with a nod, a silent way of saying it was okay and that she didn't need to respond. The gesture seemed to reassure her, and she returned to her children, helping them finish their meals without any more visible worry. The father's daughter finished her soup and bread and leaned against him, her small frame warm and comfortable. He felt a rush of affection and responsibility, knowing that he had to continue to be the anchor in her life. As the meal was winding down, the father thought about what he might say if the woman came over to thank him personally. He hadn't done it for recognition, but he knew that politeness often demanded some form of acknowledgement. Just as he was pondering this, the woman stood and gathered her children. The father watched her approach him cautiously, as if she was unsure whether it was appropriate to intrude on their table. When she reached him, she spoke softly, her voice calm but filled with emotion. "I don't know how to thank you," she said, glancing at her children to make sure they were steady. The father smiled gently. "No need to thank me. I just wanted to help," he replied. She seemed surprised by the simplicity of his words, as if they carried a weight she hadn't expected. Her eyes glistened slightly, and she nodded in quiet acknowledgement, the unspoken appreciation hanging in the air between them. They talked for a few minutes, exchanging small pleasantries. The woman shared that she was managing her children on her own today, and that sometimes life could be unpredictable. The father shared a little about raising his daughter alone, the challenges and joys that came with it. They found common ground in the shared experience of parenthood, in the small victories and daily struggles of raising children with love and patience. The conversation was light but meaningful, each word a bridge of understanding between two strangers. Her children fidgeted slightly, eager to move on, and she smiled at them, encouraging patience for just a moment longer. The father noticed the subtle way she managed her children's energy, channeling it without harshness, and he felt a renewed admiration for her skills. He realized that acts of kindness were not always grand or heroic. Sometimes they were quiet, behind-the-scenes efforts that made a profound difference in someone's life. As they prepared to leave, the woman glanced around the restaurant, noticing the few patrons who had observed the earlier interaction. There was no need for her to announce what had happened, and she didn't. Instead, she led her children toward the door, her movements deliberate and calm. The father stood with his daughter, giving a small wave as she passed. She returned the wave with a smile that carried a depth of gratitude far beyond what words could express. Once they were outside, the father and his daughter continued their walk home. She chattered happily about the soup and bread, her small voice bright and carefree. The father listened, smiling, and felt a warmth in his heart that had little to do with the meal itself. It was the warmth of knowing that small actions mattered, that compassion could be shown without expectation, and that even strangers could touch each other's lives in meaningful ways. Later that evening, the father reflected on the day. He thought about the soldier and her children, imagining the weight she carried every day. He thought about his own daughter, the little moments of joy and laughter that made the hardships worth enduring. He realized that life was full of these small intersections, moments where kindness could change a day, a mood, or even a life. And he felt grateful that he had been in the right place at the right time to make a difference. However small it seemed, as he tucked his daughter into bed that night, he held her close for a long moment, feeling the rhythm of her breathing and the quiet contentment that came from a day well spent. He whispered a silent hope that she would grow up understanding the power of kindness, that she would notice the needs of others and act without expectation. He thought of the soldier and her children and the quiet connection that had passed between them, and he felt a renewed sense of purpose. Life was unpredictable, but moments of goodness, however small, made the unpredictability bearable and even beautiful. After the brief exchange in the restaurant, the single dad couldn't stop thinking about the soldier and her children. Something about the quiet strength she carried, even in the midst of a stressful moment, stayed with him. He walked home with his daughter, feeling a sense of calm that was unusual after a long day of work. The streets were quieter now, the sun beginning to dip below the horizon, casting soft orange light over the buildings. It made him reflect on the subtle beauty in everyday life, even in moments of struggle. That evening, he and his daughter settled into their small living room. She sat cross-legged on the floor, drawing pictures, while he washed the dishes from their simple dinner. The rhythmic sound of running water and clinking dishes gave him a sense of peace, a moment to pause and think. He couldn't help but replay the scene at the restaurant in his mind, considering the soldier's exhaustion, her quiet dignity, and the way her children had responded to her care. It reminded him that parenting was not about perfection, but about presence, about showing up for someone consistently. The next morning, he woke early, as usual, to prepare for another long day at work. He kissed his daughter's forehead before she woke, feeling the weight of responsibility, but also a profound sense of purpose. He packed her lunch, double-checking that she had everything she needed, and walked her to school. The conversation along the way was light, filled with their questions about the birds, the trees, and the passing cars. He answered as best as he could, mindful that these small interactions were building blocks for her understanding of the world. After dropping her off, he walked to work, reflecting on how life often presented unexpected challenges. He thought about the soldier again, realizing that they had never exchanged names. He wondered about her story, her experiences, and the strength it took to manage everything on her own. The memory of her smile, fleeting but genuine, stayed with him throughout the day, giving him a sense of connection to someone he had barely met but already respected. During his lunch break at work, he shared the story of the previous day with a coworker, careful not to reveal any identifying details. He spoke about the importance of noticing when someone needs help, about small acts of kindness that could make a difference. His coworker listened attentively, nodding in agreement. The single dad felt a quiet satisfaction in sharing the lesson, hoping it might inspire others to act with compassion when the opportunity arose. Meanwhile, across town, the soldier thought about the encounter as well. She reflected on how unexpected and genuine the father's kindness had been. It was rare to meet someone who acted purely out of empathy, without expectation of recognition or reward. She shared a quiet smile with herself, thinking about the lesson it had imparted to her children as well, the importance of noticing others and stepping in to help when possible. It was a small but meaningful moment that reminded her of why she continued to strive to balance her responsibilities, even when the days felt long and exhausting. That evening, the father picked up his daughter from school. They walked home together, discussing her day, the friends she had played with, and the little victories she had achieved. She was vibrant and full of energy, her questions and stories keeping him engaged and on his toes. As they approached their apartment, he noticed a small park nearby and suggested they stop for a few minutes. She ran ahead eagerly, playing on the swings while he watched, appreciating her joy and freedom. It reminded him that even amidst challenges, moments of lightness and happiness were always possible. While his daughter played, the father's mind wandered back to the soldier. He realized that the act of paying her bill had meant more than just financial assistance. It had been an acknowledgement of human dignity and shared struggle. He considered how often life presented opportunities to make a difference, even in small ways, and how important it was to seize those moments. The encounter had left a lasting impression, reminding him that empathy and action were what truly mattered. Later that week, as the father and daughter continued their routine, he found himself returning to the restaurant briefly. He wanted to see if the soldier and her children were there, more out of curiosity than expectation. When he entered, he scanned the room, and there she was, quietly enjoying a meal with her children. They noticed him glance in their direction, and she offered a small, acknowledging nod. He smiled in return, feeling a quiet connection that didn't require words. The moment reaffirmed his belief in the power of small gestures, the way they could create bonds between people even without prolonged interaction. On the weekend, the father decided to take his daughter to the library. He wanted her to explore books, stories, and ideas beyond what they experienced daily. She wandered through the aisles, fascinated by the colorful covers and new worlds, while he followed closely, ready to guide her curiosity. As she selected a few books to borrow, he reflected on the importance of nurturing not just her physical needs, but her intellectual and emotional growth. It was part of the same philosophy that had led him to help the soldier, paying attention, noticing needs, and taking action where possible. The father often thought about how small actions could ripple outward, affecting more than just the immediate moment. The soldier's quiet gratitude had touched him deeply, and he wondered if his simple act had similarly influenced her perspective, her approach to her children, or the way she faced challenges. He hoped that the kindness they shared, even indirectly, would continue to influence their lives in subtle but meaningful ways. One evening, after putting his daughter to bed, the father sat by the window, reflecting on the week. He thought about the unpredictability of life, the challenges of raising a child alone, and the rare moments of connection that reminded him of why he persevered. The soldier and her children had become part of his reflections, a reminder that acts of compassion could leave lasting impressions. He felt a renewed commitment to continue showing empathy and helping others whenever possible, recognizing that it was not about recognition, but about humanity. The father realized that true courage and strength were not always visible. Sometimes it was in the quiet moments of parenthood, in the patience shown to a child, in the decision to help a stranger without expecting anything in return. The soldier had demonstrated this quietly, effortlessly, and her example had resonated with him. He felt inspired to continue modeling these values for his daughter. hoping that she would grow up understanding the importance of empathy, respect, and action. Throughout the week, the father noticed small opportunities to make a difference. He held the door open for strangers, offered a seat to someone in need on the bus, and listened attentively when friends shared their challenges. Each act was small, but together they created a pattern of attentiveness and kindness. He recognized that his initial encounter with the soldier had been a catalyst, a reminder of the power inherent in noticing and responding to the needs of others. By the end of the week, the father and daughter had settled into a rhythm. Their days filled with routine, but punctuated by moments of joy, learning, and connection. The soldier remained a quiet presence in his thoughts, her dignity and strength a touchstone for his reflections. He realized that while life was unpredictable and often challenging, it was also full of opportunities to make a positive impact, to nurture, and to connect. As the father tucked his daughter into bed one night, he whispered words of encouragement and love. He thought about the soldier and her children, imagining the strength she carried daily and the quiet heroism in her actions. He understood that heroism could take many forms, sometimes in uniform and battlefield, sometimes in everyday acts of love and care. In both, there was courage, and he felt honored to have witnessed it, even briefly. He drifted to sleep that night with a sense of gratitude and purpose. The week had reminded him of the delicate balance between struggle and joy, the importance of noticing others, and the quiet but powerful influence of simple acts of kindness. He knew that his life, intertwined with his daughter's, was a canvas where he could continue to demonstrate empathy, strength, and compassion. The encounter with the soldier had become a guiding light, a reminder that in the midst of ordinary life, extraordinary moments of connection and humanity could emerge, shaping lives in subtle but profound ways. It was a quiet morning when the father left his apartment with his daughter. The sun was barely rising, painting the sky with soft shades of pink and gold. They walked hand in hand to their usual coffee shop, a place that had become part of their routine. The father enjoyed these small rituals, moments that allowed him to slow down and savor the little joys of life. He watched his daughter skip ahead, her laughter ringing through the empty streets, and felt a warmth in his chest that made all the struggles worthwhile. As they entered the coffee shop, he noticed something unusual outside the window. 3 helicopters hovered low in the distance, their rotors creating a loud, persistent thrum that made the nearby birds scatter. People in the streets paused, staring at the noise above, some taking out their phones to capture the scene. The father felt a strange sense of unease mixed with curiosity. It wasn't every day that helicopters appeared so suddenly, especially in such a quiet neighborhood. He ordered their drinks and took a seat by the window, keeping an eye on the unfolding spectacle. Across the street, he saw people gathering, drawn by the unexpected arrival of the helicopters. The father's mind wandered to the soldier from the restaurant. He wondered if she was nearby, if somehow her life intersected with the chaos outside. It seemed improbable, yet something in the way the helicopters moved suggested they were on a precise mission, not a random display. Suddenly, 3 black SUVs pulled up near the coffee shop. Officers in uniform stepped out, moving with purposeful precision. The father's curiosity grew, and he found himself inching closer to the window, holding his daughter's hand tightly. He didn't want to alarm her, but the tension in the air was palpable. People whispered among themselves, some pointing, others taking cautious steps closer to see what was happening. The father could sense that this moment was significant, though he had no idea why. Then he saw her. The soldier from the restaurant emerged from one of the SUVs, her children following closely behind. She was calm, composed, and moved with authority, a stark contrast to the hurried and anxious crowd. The father's heart skipped a beat as he realized who she was. There was no mistaking the respect the officers showed her, the disciplined way people parted to make space. She was not just a soldier. She was a leader, someone who commanded respect through skill and experience. The father watched as one of the officers approached him, speaking quietly. He learned that the woman was a field general, a high-ranking officer responsible for major operations. It was a revelation that left him stunned. He remembered the previous encounter in the restaurant, the moments of shared humanity, and the kindness he had shown without knowing who she was. The realization struck him deeply. He had helped someone of extraordinary importance without even realizing it. The general's attention briefly shifted to the crowd, and her eyes met his. There was recognition, a silent acknowledgement of the past kindness. He waved, unsure if he should do anything more, and she nodded subtly, a gesture that conveyed gratitude and understanding. The helicopter's rotors continued to hum in the background, a constant reminder of the weight of responsibility she carried in the world. She navigated Daily Dot. The father's daughter tugged at his hand, sensing his excitement. "Dad, who is she?" she asked innocently. He smiled, unsure how much to reveal. "Someone very important," he replied gently, hoping she would understand that some things could be admired from afar without full explanation. His daughter nodded, satisfied for the moment, and returned her attention to a small drawing she had brought with her. The general guided her children into a nearby safe area, and the officers formed a protective circle around them. The father could see the subtle, practiced movements, the efficiency of people trained to handle high-stakes situations. It was all so different from the quiet moments they had shared at the restaurant. Yet the humanity he had glimpsed before was still there, evident in the way she held her children close, keeping them calm amidst the intensity. He felt a mixture of awe and humility. Here was a woman capable of commanding large-scale operations, yet moments before, she had been a mother struggling with a declined card, quietly showing her children patience and love. It was a powerful reminder that heroism was not one-dimensional. Strength could manifest in the battlefield, in strategy, and in leadership, but it could also manifest quietly in everyday life, in acts of compassion, and in the care shown to those who depended on you. As the situation outside unfolded, the father reflected on the unpredictability of life. Moments could shift dramatically, revealing truths that were impossible to anticipate. Just yesterday, he had been a stranger helping a parent pay a bill, and today, that same parent was a general commanding respect and attention on a public stage. He felt privileged to have witnessed both sides of her life, a perspective few people could claim to have seen. The general moved closer to the crowd, speaking briefly to the officers and coordinating their next steps. Her voice was calm but firm, carrying authority without harshness. The father noticed how seamlessly she transitioned from one role to another, from mother to leader, from civilian to field general. It was a rare quality, and he felt a deep admiration for her ability to navigate such different responsibilities with grace. In that moment, the father realized that kindness and courage were interconnected. The simple act of helping her in the restaurant had been a form of courage, an acknowledgement of human dignity without concern for social hierarchy or status. And now, witnessing her in her element as a leader, he saw another form of courage, strategic, decisive, and responsible. Both were necessary in life, and both left a lasting impression on those who observed them. The general's children watched quietly, their trust in her evident in the way they stayed close, following her subtle gestures and instructions. The father saw a reflection of the same trust and respect he cultivated with his own daughter. It reminded him that leadership, whether in the home or in the field, required patience, consistency, and care. It was not just about giving orders, but about guiding, protecting, and inspiring those who depended on you. Eventually, the helicopters lifted, the officers completed their coordination, and the crowd slowly dispersed. The general and her children prepared to leave, the same quiet dignity present in her movements as before. She glanced at the father one last time, her expression carrying the weight of gratitude and acknowledgement. He returned the gaze, feeling a profound connection that transcended words. In that moment, he understood that human kindness had a ripple effect, reaching further than immediate circumstances and touching lives in unexpected ways. The father watched them leave, feeling a mix of relief and admiration. He reflected on the journey from a simple act in a restaurant to witnessing extraordinary leadership in action. It was a powerful reminder that every interaction mattered, that moments of compassion could intersect with lives of profound significance. His daughter tugged at his hand, bringing him back to the present, and he smiled, realizing that these were the lessons he wanted to instill in her: empathy, courage, and awareness of the impact of small actions. As they walked home, the father shared a quiet reflection with his daughter about the day, speaking in simple terms about helping others, noticing struggles, and the importance of respect and gratitude. He didn't go into detail about the general's rank, focusing instead on the values demonstrated: patience, kindness, courage, and love. His daughter listened intently, absorbing the story in her own way, learning the importance of small acts of humanity. That evening, back at their apartment, the father felt a renewed sense of purpose. He realized that the world was filled with hidden heroes, people whose daily actions, whether seen or unseen, shaped the lives of those around them. He thought about the general, her children, and the brief intersection of their lives, understanding that moments of connection, no matter how fleeting, had lasting impact. He tucked his daughter into bed, holding her close for a long moment. He whispered softly about the importance of noticing others, of acting with kindness, and of understanding the value of courage in all its forms. She smiled in her sleep, and he left the room quietly, carrying with him the profound lesson of the day: that life was unpredictable, that heroism took many forms, and that even the smallest acts of compassion could resonate far beyond their immediate moment. The days after the helicopter incident passed quietly for the single dad and his daughter. Life resumed its familiar rhythm, with school, work, and small daily rituals shaping their routine. Yet the encounter with the field general lingered in his mind, a reminder of how unexpectedly meaningful life's moments could be. He found himself thinking often about her children, the way they trusted and followed her lead, and how a simple act of kindness had connected their lives in ways he could never have imagined. One morning, while preparing breakfast, the father noticed a small envelope slid under the door. He picked it up, curiosity sparking as he opened it. Inside was a card and a note, written in neat handwriting. The note expressed gratitude, not for recognition or reward, but for the simple humanity he had shown at the restaurant. The general had taken the time to write, acknowledging that his act of kindness had made a significant difference in her day, and, by extension, in her children's lives. The father felt a mix of humility and warmth, touched that someone so important had remembered him in such a personal way. He shared the card with his daughter, explaining in simple terms that kindness mattered, and that sometimes people noticed and appreciated it even when we didn't expect them to. She looked at the card with wide eyes, fascinated that someone important could care enough to write. "We helped her, Dad," she said softly, as if understanding the depth of the gesture. He nodded, smiling. "Yes, and it made a difference. That's what matters." In the following days, life continued with its usual challenges. The father worked long hours, balancing the demands of his job with the responsibility of raising his daughter alone. Yet there was a renewed sense of purpose in his routine. The memory of the general and her children reminded him that acts of empathy and care, however small, had the power to ripple outward, touching lives in ways that were often invisible. He carried this lesson with him, approaching each day with a mindful attentiveness to others. Occasionally, he thought about the general's children and the brief but meaningful interactions he had witnessed. He imagined them learning from her example, developing trust, patience, and compassion, much as his daughter learned from his guidance. He realized that parenting, whether in ordinary circumstances or extraordinary ones, shared a common thread: nurturing, guiding, and being present for the people who depended on you. The general's example had reinforced the values he held dear, inspiring him to continue modeling them for his daughter. One afternoon, he received a phone call from the restaurant where the initial encounter had occurred. The owner wanted to thank him for his kindness, mentioning that the general had shared the story with the staff. They expressed appreciation for his generosity, noting that it had left a lasting impression on both patrons and employees. The father listened quietly, a sense of pride and humility swelling within him. He had acted out of simple empathy, and yet it had created a positive ripple far beyond what he could have anticipated. As the weeks passed, he continued to notice opportunities to make small differences in the lives of those around him. He helped neighbors with groceries, offered encouragement to coworkers facing challenges, and took moments to listen when someone needed to talk. Each action, while modest, felt meaningful, a reinforcement of the lesson he had learned from the encounter with the general. He realized that the value of kindness was not in grand gestures, but in consistent, thoughtful attention to the needs of others. His daughter grew more aware of these acts as well. She asked questions, observed, and began to imitate small gestures of consideration and care in her own life. The father took pride in seeing her internalize these values, understanding that the lessons he imparted through example could shape her character in profound ways. He recognized that the combination of empathy, patience, and courage would equip her to navigate life's challenges with confidence and compassion. One day, as they walked home from school, the father and daughter passed a quiet street where a small accident had left someone struggling to manage groceries and a stroller. Without hesitation, he stepped forward to assist, carrying bags and helping to steady the stroller. His daughter followed his lead, offering small gestures of help and comfort. The incident was minor, but it felt significant, a real-world application of the values he had sought to instill. He felt the quiet satisfaction of making a difference, no matter how small. Later that evening, he reflected on how much life had changed in subtle ways since that first act of kindness at the restaurant. The encounter with the general had been fleeting, yet it had left an enduring impact, shaping his awareness and inspiring him to live with greater attentiveness. He understood that every interaction, every choice to act with empathy, had the potential to influence others, often in ways that were unseen. The world, he realized, was composed of countless small acts that collectively created meaning and connection. The general's influence, though indirect, continued to resonate. He found himself more mindful of the people he encountered, noticing struggles, offering encouragement, and extending help when possible. Each act reinforced a pattern of compassion, a personal philosophy rooted in the simple principle that everyone deserved respect and consideration. The encounter had taught him that heroism and goodness were not limited to extraordinary circumstances, but could be demonstrated every day through attention, care, and action. Over time, the father's daughter began to share stories of her own small acts of kindness at school and in the neighborhood. She helped classmates, comforted friends, and expressed gratitude in thoughtful ways. He listened with pride, seeing the lessons he had modeled reflected in her actions. The ripple effect, which had begun with a simple gesture at a restaurant, now extended into the next generation. He felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that his efforts to teach empathy and compassion were taking root in her heart. One evening, as they sat together looking out the window at the city lights, the father reflected on the interconnectedness of life. He thought about the general, her children, and the quiet moment of recognition shared between them. He realized that life was composed of countless intersections, fleeting yet profound, where acts of kindness and courage left lasting impressions. These moments, often unnoticed, shaped the character of individuals and the communities in which they lived. He felt gratitude for the opportunity to have played a small part in someone else's story. The experience had reinforced his belief in the power of empathy, teaching him that even when we are unaware of the full consequences of our actions, the effects can be meaningful and enduring. It was a lesson he intended to carry forward, both in his interactions with his daughter and with the wider world around him. As the father tucked his daughter into bed that night, he whispered softly about the importance of noticing others, of acting with kindness, and of showing courage in everyday moments. She listened, her eyes heavy with sleep, absorbing the lessons through both words and example. He kissed her forehead gently, feeling the weight of responsibility, but also the profound satisfaction of knowing he was shaping her, understanding of the world with care and love. After leaving her room, he sat quietly in the living room, reflecting on the journey from a simple act of paying a restaurant bill to the lasting lessons it had imparted. He understood that life was unpredictable, that heroism could take many forms, and that small acts of compassion could resonate far beyond their immediate context. The encounter with the general had been a turning point, a reminder that every individual had the capacity to make a difference. He felt a renewed commitment to live with attentiveness, empathy, and courage, recognizing that these qualities were not reserved for extraordinary circumstances, but were essential in everyday life. The story of that day, the helicopters, and the quiet acknowledgement of gratitude had become part of his personal philosophy, shaping the way he approached challenges, relationships, and parenting. The father's life continued, filled with work, responsibilities, and the ongoing joys and struggles of raising his daughter alone. Yet, within the ordinary rhythm of his days, he carried the extraordinary lesson of the encounter, that human connection, acts of kindness, and the courage to act without expectation could leave lasting impact. It was a lesson he would continue to model, teach, and embody, ensuring that the legacy of empathy and courage extended beyond the moment and into the lives of those he touched, especially his daughter. In the end, he understood that true heroism was not always visible, that greatness was not measured by rank or recognition, but by the quiet, consistent choices made in the service of others. The encounter with the general had revealed this truth, showing him that the smallest gestures could create ripples that reached farther than imagined. And in living this truth each day, he honored both the memory of that moment and the ongoing journey of parenthood, compassion, and human connection.